We play tested Project 1776 on Roll20 for the first time. Not the first time we've play tested by any means, but the first time we play tested on Roll20. And I wanted to give us kind of the opportunity to talk a little bit about our experience with it, not necessarily experience on Roll20 playing Project 1776, but more so our experience with the combat section. What was new, how it was different, observations about what worked, what are the opportunities to improve things. So I'm going to turn it over to the three of you. Obviously, I've been really close to Project 7076. I kind of know its insides and out, but I'm really interested in hearing from you. Kind of like, what did you like about it? First off, let's start there. Like, what did you like about the combat system that we played tonight?
So I will preface this saying that we're playing with Zweihander classes in Project 1776 combat rules.
That's right. Yeah. So in Desperation Point, our kind of weekly game, we are using the combat rules from Project 1776, which means we're mostly using ranged weapons. So that's right. So what did we like about what we saw?
I thought it was interesting being able to shoot through cover at range, because if we're going to be doing a largely ranged combat, and everyone's always taking cover, it'd be really hard, especially early levels, to get through any sort of damage threshold. And so, having a way around that is good.
Yeah, and that's kind of that's one of the things I think we didn't quite experience it with Zweihander, because most Zweihander combat's done mano a mano via melee. But when you have combat that mostly relies on ranged weapons, there has to be a way around cover without just simply closing the distance. And firing through cover, as the action is, fire through cover is what it's called, is a way through that. That's right.
The thing I noticed that I really enjoyed was the fact that every action in combat has critical success and critical failure states. So it's no longer a GM fiat. What happens when someone critically succeeds or fails? It's right there in the text. It just makes it easier and a little bit more snappy. The historian or game master doesn't have to make decisions regarding what to do in those kind of edge case situations.
Yeah, that was actually kind of due to popular demand. I think that players kind of want to know what happens when they roll poorly or when they roll well. And we see this already, like in the Grimoire with Zweihander. We have critical success and critical failure states. Moving those into the combat section for Project 1776. I have to catch myself not to say the name of it. But was something a decision we made early on. That way you kind of know what happens, and it makes things snappier. That way the game master, or in this case the historian, is not left kind of like, well, what happens this time? Because it always ends up kind of, at least in our games, it's kind of like, oh, you lose an AP, or you drop your weapon, but now it's just like tied to the action, and each one has something unique about it. So yeah, I'd agree with that.
You never really feel cheated by the game master, vice versa. The game master doesn't feel cheated by the players or whatever. And when you're looking at something in the actions and combat section, you know exactly what you're going to get. There's no surprises, except when it comes down to the roll. And you know what you have to lose. You know what you have to gain. You have the potential to lose or gain when you take a specific action. So that's one of those risk versus reward things that we really love in Powered by Zweihander games, at least in my opinion. So that's one thing I really enjoyed about this new rule set.
Yeah, Kay. So what did you like about what happened tonight?
Actually, one of the things that I think really makes the game more viable is before, a lot of the perilous stunts and everything were limited to one particular skill. And I like that this one diversifies a bit. So you're not, your character doesn't seem so locked down, because you can take this or that to be able to do certain actions and to be able to actually flavor the combat, as opposed to, like it used to be. If I had athletics, I know exactly which perilous stunt I was going to use. But with this, I feel like it gives you more opportunity to kind of play around with the combat, as opposed to feeling locked in.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that perilous stunts, just for a little bit of background, were developed for characters who are not focused in simple melee, simple range, martial range, to have alternatives. But a lot of those alternatives focused around athletics and toughness, which were mostly tied to the warrior archetype. So, one of the important changes we made with I almost did it with Project 1776. I almost did it.
Just pause every time you're about to say it. That way you have time to edit it out, right?
That's right. I need to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things we did
We
was
need a beep. We need a beep.
Yeah.
Beep you, Dan.
Beep it out.
Yeah.
we really wanted to add in like more flexibility. I think to your point around like, because perilous stunts in Flames of, oh god damn it, Project 1776.
Now you really have to do it.
Now you really have to
edit it out.
Well, to be fair, I don't think this is going to come out until the Kickstarter's on. Maybe we'll release it before.
We'll fix it in post.
We'll fix it in post.
That's right. We'll fix it. It's all good.
Fuck it, we're doing it live.
Oh, we're actually live on Periscope. Hey, by the way, we're on Twitch. Who goes live on Periscope? Anyway, who goes live
Hello.
on Facebook Gaming? How about that?
Hello, 2005. How are you?
I know. What was Twitch once called before it was Twitch? Justin.tv?
Yep.
Yeah, we're on Justin.tv tonight. Wow. So
Hey guys, what's up?
that's right. So it's back on track. So yeah, the each of the perilous stunts are, in this case, they're called rough and tumble in Flames. Oh, damn it. Project 1776.
You need a button that you press that says 1776 for you.
Project 1776. And these are actually, I'm gonna put in an overlay on the bottom of the screen. I'll put a stinger in there somewhere, I'm sure. But so for Project 1776, there are no perilous stunts. We call them rough and tumble because perilous stunts are mostly focused around melee, right? And although we wanted to have some sort of stunt-like system in here, we called it rough and tumble for a couple of reasons. One, because it reflects the weird proto version of boxing in America. It originates in the South. It's this really strange martial art where people were called gougers, and they literally they would gouge people's eyes out. They sharpen their fingers and shit. There's this really crazy stuff. If you're listening to this, go look up gouging. It's the predecessor to boxing before boxing had rules. It's a very, very good story. Look it up. But rough and tumble was the other thing it was called colloquially. So when I thought about combat in Project 1776, it's less about melee weapons, but we want face-to-face to be really dangerous. So perilous stunts were replaced with rough and tumble. And a big part of that, like you mentioned, Kay, was to make it more flexible. We want these options to be open for everyone. So we have two different skills you can use as opposed to one. So that, I think to your point, it makes things a little bit more flexible, and you don't feel so locked in, right? Because the God's honest truth is perilous stunts were still mostly better for knave archetype or warrior archetype, but in Project 1776, almost did it again. It's for everyone. So there's lots of, and just for our listeners, or viewers, depending if we put this video out. What are some of the rough and tumble abilities we saw tonight?
Knockdown.
That's right.
A lot of knockdown.
A lot of knockdown.
Yeah.
I had an ability synergy that worked really well with coordination, so I kind of spammed it to a degree just because it's kind of a weakness for the opponents. So
yeah,
why not?
Exploit.
Mm-hmm.
Exploit their weaknesses.
I was flipping to succeed every coordination test, and whenever I succeeded, I would critically succeed, and it was called it's the gesture ability from main gauche called Banter and Jibe.
Banter and Jibe. Yeah, the knockdown is nice. It basically combines takedown and knockout together. We were able to kind of eliminate a redundant perilous stunt into one thing. Obviously, when you see Project 1776, or when you're playing the quick play, which we're going to release around the time of the Kickstarter, you'll be able to see how it works. But what other rough and tumble abilities did we see tonight?
Eye gouging.
Eye gouging. That's right. And they're disoriented if you strike, which means they have to spend 1 additional AP for reactions until the end of combat.
That is another thing. I feel like the status effects, if you will, that come from like the what are used to be perilous stunts are more simplified, and I feel like it actually feels more smooth.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think, when Adam and I were kind of first concepting how combat would work, one of our design goals was to say less rolling, because there's a lot of dice rolls in Zweihander combat in general, and we knew that if we were using ranged weapons and introducing all these new things, we'd be adding on more and more layers of rolls. So to your point around rough and tumble, like in Perilous Sun, you resist at the beginning of every turn. In this, it just lasts until the end of combat, so it makes them more impactful, right? So now it's like, before you would be in this system where you're like, okay, I'm going to use dirty tricks, now I'm going to attack, now you use dirty tricks, I'm using melee attack. Now it's just like, I'm going to use a wrench limb, and after they're strained, they have to spend an additional action point for attack actions until the end of combat. So as opposed to saying resist every turn, now it's just it lasts until the end of combat, just to simplify things. Did anybody use words as weapons?
I tried.
Tried once,
That's right.
yeah.
I critically failed. I tried.
So there's an ability called words as weapons, where you can declare to either hasten your friends, inspire them, or intimidate foes. And I think, yeah, you if I'm not mistaken, you had you critically failed, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I critically failed, and so you gave me disorient.
Yeah, I think you're disoriented. I think that's what it was.
Yeah, it was disoriented.
That's right.
So fun. No, intimidated. You gave me intimidated because I was at minus on thresholds.
That's right. Yeah. So, what other kind of actions in combat did we use tonight?
One that I enjoyed, and which was, I feel, used a lot, was what was it?
Fire through cover, because that's what I was.
Well, there was fire through cover. We mentioned that, but also targeted attack, which I liked a lot, because it essentially is called shot, but better, because it will potentially apply a combat condition. I like that a lot. So it's more things you can do than just I attack or I'm going to make a called shot.
Yeah, so the way it works is you declare you want to target the arm, body, head, or leg of a foe, then you make an attack. And after that, if the foe fails or cannot defend using coordination, because it only works for ranged weapons, they suffer one of 4 combat conditions depending on what you targeted. So if you target their arm, they're disarmed, their weapon is thrown 3 yards away, yanked from their grasp. If you hit them in the body, they're gutted, meaning they have to spend 1 additional action point for movement actions till the end of combat, which is deadly for ranged weapons. Trying to get distance, because you always want to get distance with ranged weapons. Head is disoriented, which is spend 1 additional action point for reactions. So if you think about that, resist, like to resist something is 0 AP. If you're disoriented, it costs you 1 AP, which can eat up AP. Because once again, remember that the thing about combat in Powered by Zweihander games is all about the AP economy, the action point economy. And then finally, if you strike the leg, they're prone. So yeah, that target attack is interesting and fun, and it's less about just like, I'm going to do some damage, I'm going to do some damage, and something else is going to happen. Therefore, a response to some of the challenges that we face with Called Shot and Zweihander, which is, I'm going to do other cool things, but in Zweihander you have to have talents, and this is just like, you don't need the talent to do it. It's already baked into the action in combat. So, anything else that you really liked about the new combat system that we didn't talk about?
Let's see here.
We covered a lot of ground, and to be fair for our listeners or viewers, I didn't tell them I was going to do an after session, a postmortem.
That's all right.
Yeah,
I like the quick load. It's dangerous and interesting.
Yeah,
always use that though.
Yeah, so let's talk about quick load for a moment.
Irresponsible as shit.
So if weapons require anywhere from 2 to 3 action points to load, games will quickly become bogged down from load, fire, reload, fire, and you're essentially spending every other round, which coincidentally this game uses rounds and not like previous Zweihander. You'll spend every other turn firing, which is not what we want to do. We want there to be movement and momentum, and I'm reminded of the scene in Last of the Mohicans when they're chasing Magua up the hill in the cliff sides. And Daniel Day-Lewis and the father of Magua is like chasing after him with their weapons and firing, and it's just like a moving firing system. So there's some kind of inspiration there. So we knew that if we just simply had people load, fire, it would bog the game down. It would extend combat, but we want combat to be super snappy like Zweihander. We want it still to be dangerous and fast and fun. So we added an action called quick load, which basically costs you 0 action points to load a ranged weapon. However, you can only use it short distance, and you're left defenseless until the beginning of your next turn. So you may use it out of desperation. You may use it if you've got enough distance between you and foes. But once again, if they start closing the distance and start using rough and tumble, things can get really, really bad really quick. So yeah, the quick load action was a necessity to keep things moving, because I want players to feel pressured whether they load normally or quick load, because we know that we want combat to be not only just fast and furious, but also unpredictable at times. And I think we ran into that a couple times actually in this. We had somebody, in fact, I think, Mike, your character struck somebody who had quick loaded because they were left defenseless and they were knocked out.
I did. I very much took advantage of that.
Tell us what happened.
So, they had moved up to, and then quick loaded, so that way they would be in their short range, and then fired. And so I was then able to hustle over to them. I think I had to move twice, and then use knockout or knockdown to potentially knock him out, since he was then defenseless. So right. It was a very risky reward type thing, and it didn't pay off for him.
Yeah. And this is something that goes back to Zweihander, lessons learned, right? We've been playing this game for 6 years. We've got 3 years and 2 years, called 2 years actually in publication. Knockdown is not used that often, because getting somebody defenseless is, you have to be surprised, right? So now we have an opportunity for people to be left defenseless if they're using quick load, and we have the opportunity to use more knockouts. So
right.
It's a very very risky maneuver to do, but if you need to quick load and get that shot off on that same turn, you can do it, which is good.
And it was still risky for me because I was very much like out of position at that point.
That's right.
But I was like, I took one of them, so if I go down, it was like a net, 0. But at least we got that first blood.
Yeah. Okay, I think we had kind of a situation happen with your character, if I'm not mistaken, where maybe it wasn't when you quick load. I can't remember. There's like something happened during combat, and I almost took a note on because I thought it'd be interesting to talk about. I can't quite remember what it was though.
Right at the beginning?
Yeah, I think it was toward the beginning. I want to say we talked about take cover. Oh, you got shot while behind cover.
Yeah, fire through cover, and so then because I guess basically you lose like your ability to use that cover after you've been fired through cover. So the first one hit me for fire through cover. So then the second one didn't actually take any of the negatives of fire through cover. So those two followed up each other. And then after that, I had no bonuses to my damage threshold because no cover left.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about take cover, and this really kind of plays off there's no armor in Project 1776. The only thing that modifies your damage threshold is your determination value, which is like fate, but a little different. So people will take cover. But once you're shot and you suffer damage while behind cover, the character's mind thinks that, well, I can't take cover behind this rock anymore, this tree or whatever it may be. They kind of like have it's kind of like a cognitive dissonance, like, I'm no longer safe here. I need to move. I need to go different cover. So that character, in this case, Kay's character, Sweets, wasn't able to take cover behind that rock. But if Calvin went up there, he'd be fine. because it's a personal thing, right? We don't really have rules for cover being destroyed in mechanics, because I thought that would add some complexity with the game master has to track like hits against cover and historian, my apologies. But that felt really obtuse, and we get some pushback on the initial rounds of combat playtesting from our playtesters out in our private playtest in Wild. So we removed that, and so we just implied basically if you get shot while taking cover, you no longer use that cover to modify your damage threshold for the rest of combat, just to make things simple.
They figured out simple geometry and how to shoot around it.
Yeah, it's like
Kind of my thought.
yeah, exactly. Anytime you're like hiding behind a corner and you get shot, like you're like, I can't stay here anymore. I just got shot. I'm going to die, right? So thinking about it narratively, we kind of made a mechanic out of it to where it wouldn't be too complex. One thing we didn't talk about yet, but I thought was something to kind of mention, is that one other thing about Project 1776 combat is that the historian, whenever combat begins, they actually disclose kind of 4 elements as they set the scene. They basically say, where's it taking place? Basically describing the place narratively. They talk about any cover that may be on the battlefield. They're going to talk about if there's any sort of terrain that may prohibit movement. And then they're finally going to talk about light and weather, because light and weather will impact whether you can use assist dice, whether you get to flip things to fail. It'll also impact distances with weapons, because concealment like fog and rain and things like that clearly make it more difficult to strike people from a distance. So you'll see some of that in the quick play. We won't talk too much about that on the conversation here, but so
Dan, how do you feel about running Project 7076 combat as Theater of the Mind, since we were running it with figures tonight?
Mm-hmm.
So during the start of combat, you talk about things like the lighting and the cover and that
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing. So how do you think that would play, as opposed to since that's what we usually do in our games?
Yeah, so the interesting part about this is that we have 3 playtest groups. I don't think that any of you really know this, but so we have a playtest group in our Discord and there's 3 of them right now playing Project 1776, and they played combat. That was the first thing we released, and we got some really interesting feedback. In fact, we went from version 1.0 to 1.9 based on feedback from people who are playing it with grid and figures and playing it in Theater of the Mind. I think that the game is built for Theater of the Mind. However, I think to Mike's point, the game I think is more successfully played if you have grids and figures. It's a little difficult for us because we're using Roll20, and Roll20 is a little bit cumbersome for me because I don't have a mouse and a second monitor yet. However, I can envision using figures with a second camera set up over it and moving your figures around if we use something like, say, a Vorpal board, where you have your own cursor and mouse and I can see where you want to go. But me, I think since our home group with Queen of Embers moved to figures and grids, I've enjoyed the game in a different way. I wouldn't say it's better. I just enjoy it in a different way now. I know, Mike, you obviously have you prefer figures.
Oh yeah. Anytime I can use figures, I think it's great because I like the board. I like being able to see using tactics.
There's less guesswork.
It's less guesswork. It relies less on the GM to like explain everything to me. You know, I can just kind of look around and go, okay, I have an idea. And that way, yeah, it's better for everyone, I think, because then everyone has the same advantage because everyone can see the same stuff, essentially.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think the interesting thing about that, and we ran into this tonight actually, with figures and grids, is line of sight. Yep. So for gunpowder weapons, right? So we were like, what constitutes an engagement? Well, there's no engagement in oh well, it doesn't matter. Project 1776. I'm gonna erase that out.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll rewind. Okay. It doesn't matter in Project 1776 as there's no engagement. They're just engaged. Are you next to somebody? But I think there's a consideration here, which is interesting to think about. So if we think about velocity, you can't arc a bullet, you can arc an arrow, you can arc a hatchet, but you can't arc a bullet. So when you were
shot.
Well, that's a different thing, right?
No, I know.
But I'm talking about arcing a bullet. Are you putting something up on?
Yeah, just for a reminder for you, Dan. I'm gonna have this up for the rest of the night.
Yeah, thank you for. He's put up a sign actually in the video, so I remember he's holding it up. So,
should I also?
Everyone gets a sign.
Yeah, that's right. The interesting thing about this, I think, the relationship with here is that we kind of were like, does Mike's character need to move to hit somebody? And we're like, yeah, probably, because we have a grid. And then the question came up like, well, are they engaged? And the answer is not really, because if you're using, but what ammunition can be arced versus what can be fired forward? I think this will probably precipitate a change in weapons for Project 1776. That's right. I got it right. Because I'm actually in the middle of writing that article now, that chapter. And we need to figure out something, because what we don't want to have happen is like bullets, well, quote, shoot straight.
Yeah.
Arrows can be arced. So we'll probably make some distinctions there within the 1776. We'll make some distinctions there in the qualities to clarify that, because I think to your point, Mike, like it is that we definitely want to accommodate figures and grid, but we also have to be cognizant that a lot of people are playing theater of the mind. So theater of the mind allows you to be a little more loosey-goosey with things, but it can still be a tactical experience, right? Zweihander was a tactical experience for us for years in theater of the mind.
I mean, I feel like there's enough war games out there that people have played, whether it's like Warhammer, whatever, or any of the other tabletop miniature games, like War Machine. And people have kind of, I think, gotten used to the idea of, okay, does this thing have line of sight? Now it's different because we can't actually like move and like get down and look. But I mean, with World 20, it's just, okay, it looks like they would have like, I was going to cast that magical spell, but I was knocked down. They were knocked down behind some rocks. It's like we just can't see each other. So I would have to get up and move, and so that all makes sense. But
there's a certain level, there's a certain point, like in tactical play, that you have to consider there's narrative consideration, right? Like I can tell you, these rocks are, these rocks provide medium cover, but you would never be able to reflect on a battlefield, on figures and grids, like line of sight in that instance, right? So we simply have to say that, you probably don't have line of sight. It's historian fiat or game master fiat or DM fiat, whatever you want to call that. That's fiat that allows us to make that call. But I think that I can probably be a little more clear. I'll have to go back and adjust some things. I think that's probably we should jump over to like what opportunities there are with what we saw tonight. I think regarding line of sight, that's one. The second is how hard terrain is treated. Hard terrain in Zweihander, you can't charge maneuver or run through. In Project 1776, thanks for holding up the sign. We require a coordination test, but that feels like more roles, so we'd immediately dump that tonight in the middle of play. I think what we're going to do instead is say that you can't charge maneuver or run through it, but if you wish to traverse terrain, it's like it costs 2 yards instead of 1. So I think there's some lessons. Yeah, exactly, Kay. I think there's some stuff we can apply here from 4th edition D&D, honestly, to help mitigate how certain terrains are handled without complicating it, right? What are some other observations? What are the other things that we saw tonight we would opportunities to improve? Because we had a lot happen in combat. A lot of it was net new for all of us too. This is like first experience for the home game crew.
A lot of it was random criticals out of nowhere.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't think that deserves a change. Honestly, I think that adds a lot of fun factor to it. I mean, that's.
Oh no, it was fine. It's just Roll20 really liked the doubles tonight.
It did. It
yeah,
really
what the heck? Yeah,
Nick took Adam's spot.
He did. Yeah, we had lots of
100. Just
crit success, crit failures. We had a natural 1. We had a natural 100. I mean, we had all kinds of crazy stuff that happened tonight.
Yeah.
With dice rolls. But like of what happened in combat, and to set the stage here for our listeners or viewers who didn't see, we basically had 3 heroes and 4 villains, and they were on this battlefield in the middle where all these kind of creeks run through it, and there's all these big rocks and stones and falling over trees and things like that. So plenty of opportunity for cover, plenty of opportunity for hard terrain, rough terrain, and a lot of interesting things that happened. I don't know if you noticed this. Maybe it's just because I know the system, but I kept moving my people further and further away from you while you kept getting closer and closer and closer, which is interesting to me, because I think that's a behavior born from Zweihander.
I think it's because we have characters that are Zweihander and they're not built as much for range, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think that's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean,
well, since like melee is so much more devastating in this game, I felt like it was worth the risk.
Yeah.
And if I was actually trying to protect my character, like this is the character I'm keeping for a while, I may not have done some stupid things, but I was like, let's try it and see how it works.
You attack,
Yeah.
you protect. Is what you're saying?
yeah.
Protect.
I mean, the only reason why I wouldn't
CC.
the only reason why I moved forward was to do the knockout, and that's because I saw an opportunity to quickly take someone out of the game.
Yeah.
If they hadn't been defenseless, then I probably would have moved like from here where I was to like maybe back here behind the rock. To get
Yeah.
And then make him kind of keep chasing me, and maybe they do something. But yeah, it just the situation warranted moving up and punching him in the face, and then
Yeah.
My sling broke. I didn't have an option.
yeah, and then we had a critical failure on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't. So I had to. That's the only reason I moved in.
Yeah.
Did somebody bind wounds in the middle of combat?
No, I did.
They did.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
right, yeah. So if we know in Zweihander, bind wounds is a 10-minute action, now we just say it's 1 minute so you can do it in the middle of combat. Because before it's like rely on laudanum, rely on a heal test later on after combat. Now we want people to be able to mend themselves, and depending on your current damage condition track and your intelligence bonus, you can actually go up multiple steps at once. But you're still limited to doing it once a day, regardless. But you can do it in combat now, which is good.
That probably it saved my ass. So
Yeah. What did you think about the coin pool? Pools, plural.
We were using them like crazy because this was a test combat.
Yeah.
I think that there's somewhat of a meta strategy in terms of you can hoard the coins and make sure that the historian can't use them in certain situations. But for the most part, we were they kind of just flowed back and forth pretty quickly with this combat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really, as being a magic user now and being able to throw some magic missiles, I really wanted to be able to make them explode, and they couldn't. And I was like, I actually was thinking of, using my ranged bow, because if I did hit, then I could use it to turn it into a 6 and cause an explosion and do a bit more damage. But it was interesting.
Yeah, the coin. I think your point around coin hoarding, right? So let's set this up first. So we know in Zweihander there is a challenge with fortune and misfortune. Here's what the challenge is. It is a meta mechanic that can be simply dumped in the last half hour of gameplay, right? So because it's not going to, because fortune doesn't restore to your pool. It just goes in the game master's pool and game and it goes away. So there's a impetus to dump all your coins by the end of the game session if you're not in combat, because the game master's not going to use them, right?
Use it or lose it.
Exactly. So the way it is in Project 1776 is we call them coins. And coins flow back and forth between the pool. Players use one, the historian gets it. The historian uses one, the players get it. So it's like a tug of war back and forth. So to address the the concern around hoarding coins, the answer is, well, players don't start with all the coins at the beginning of the game. The historian starts with one, and then the players actually roll a 1d6 chaos die, at the beginning of a game session, and for anything that if it lands on a phase 6, the game master gets another coin. So there's as a game master, you have reasons to use coins. As players, and you'll see this in the traits, there are reasons to use coins. So and especially because coins now have additional application to edit situations, and they're going to come back to you regardless, right? So even if you wanted to hoard the pool, I don't think that's a behavior we'll see with players broadly, if only because mechanics like this, doom pools, what they call them now in Hellboy, and they've been called the hero pool in other games. I think Cortex Prime calls it the doom pool as well. Excuse me. There are other games that use these mechanics where they flow back and forth, and they don't get hoarded. In fact, we've got over a year and several months of gameplay with this specific mechanic that's been used on our Twitch channel. Matt Jowett has been using Fortune, Misfortune, flip back and forth for quite some time. And in fact, he was the one who inspired us to develop the coin pool and have it flow back and forth. So I think your point about coin hoarding, I don't know if it's founded, if only because we see different behaviors broadly. But I think one way we can deliver on it on the game side from Flames of Project 1776, the way we deliver on it from Project 1776 is that we actually have things that are fueled by coins. So we are there are things that you must fuel with it, and you'll definitely see that in Magic later on once Magic is kind of quote written for the game, just not ready yet. So we're using Zweihander Magic, but I guess my point is I think coins are going to flow freely, and they should, because they're not only just mechanical rewards, but you guys use them for narrative benefits. And I think players like to be able to take narrative control of things sometimes, right? Like you want to tell a story, you want to play Game Master for a moment, and you get to do that with the coin pool, because once again, you can edit situations that either work in your favor or work in my disfavor. The historian, that is. What's one thing you didn't like? Like, is there anything that you can think of in the middle of it you're like, I don't like that, I could take it or leave it? Like, is there anything that happened in the middle of combat where you felt maybe frustrated, not uncertain, but frustrated by a game mechanic that existed that you wish was different?
I think that me personally, and this is just coming from and maybe playing it more, it would make more sense or whatever. But I feel like the setting, the environment, the stage, like having the weather and the lighting and all of those things, it was kind of annoying in this way, but it's because we're trying to beta test. I think if there's a way for it to be either displayed or like if it's on a character sheet or something so that it's easy reference for people, I think that's something I think that needs to be kept in mind, because I have ADHD, which means if I hear like 5 different facts about this battlefield given it a standard time, if I'm not completely on it, I'm gonna forget at least 1 or 2 of them, and that can be frustrating. And so like if there's a way to make sure that is well displayed or whatever, like it's innate in certain things somehow, I just think that needs to be a smooth system for it to work well.
Yes. So
if it was like 1 or 2, I would say it's okay, but it seems like it's just a lot to try to keep track of in your head as a player.
Yeah.
The historian too, I would say.
Yeah, I think that it's a good point too. So one thing that is suggested in the book, excuse me, specifically about this, is that the game master should lay down index cards that say this. So they're persistent on the battlefield. In fact, during our Roll20 play, we use the text box just kind of like, boom, here's some things that you need to know about it. I agree. I think the historian has a lot to handle, and players do too. Simplifying that is probably a good idea. I think continuing to reinforce the idea of like displaying it in the same way we display the initiative ladder is probably smart. In fact, I'm sure on the initiative tracker, there'd probably be space or affordance to show things that players should keep in mind. But I mean, a good historian, right, is going to remember these things. But if they don't, it's okay too, because honestly, it's a game. And at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is, are we having fun? And it's okay if we forget rules sometimes. But I think that, to your point, like, rules that don't add anything interesting to the game don't belong. I think there's probably a layer of complication. You're probably right. There's a layer of complication right up front that could probably be winnowed down into a simpler approach.
I mean, I kind of have an idea for it, which would be make it kind of a package deal. As in, instead of each thing having its own layer, you go, this is combat, call it whatever you want, but like, this is environment 1, which is going to have these specific things about it. This is environment 2, this is environment 3. You know, make a couple of them that are just like a straight up card, and they're always the same if they're that, and you know this is the environment I'm walking into. And I think that might simplify it a little bit. You know, maybe in the back give the option to be able to separate out those so that you can create whatever environment you want. But I think as a standard system, it might not be a horrible idea for those to be standardized and then give the option. Me personally, that at least that's how I would.
Yeah, I think it's probably smart too. I think that one thing that's persistent in all of these Powered by Zweihander games is the triptych, right? So things are typically delivered by 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. Everyone who's played a Powered by Zweihander game has seen this math elegance is built in. It's the same thing for way options are presented. 3 tiers, 3 professions, you know. So I think that roll 3d10 to create characters. This can be packaged better and easier. I'm not too worried about that. I think that makes sense. I think it's valid too. I think some of our playtesters had initially were curious how to handle it in the same way as, like, how do you display it? Do you hide it? Is a historian responsible for it? If they are, can anybody else be responsible? And in fact, one thing that Project 1776 brings forward in combat is that the historian, thank you, Mike, the historian does not track initiative. It's the player's responsibility. So there are ways to, because I've become a big believer in we all bear a burden of the load for game rules.
Delegation.
Yeah.
If I don't remember my own rules, I don't expect the GM to either.
Yeah. I mean,
vice versa. Yeah.
I think that typically games say know the rules for your character, but the reality is that we're all playing a game together, right? We're here to support, not just to have our characters be awesome, but have all characters be awesome. This is why I think it's important to call out the historian or game master like we do in our games when something is wrong or we forgot something. That's fine. We should do those things. And I think that we could probably do the same thing when we talk about these kind of setting the scene, the weather and the distances and things and cover and things like that. I think that's perfectly valid. And I think that we could probably offload that to the players too, to bear a burnout responsibility on top of the historian's responsibility for running everything else.
It's fine. I don't want people to be intimidated by seeing this entire long list of statistics and going, crap, you know?
I mean, it's right now it's like 200 words, which is probably too much, but it can be simplified. So anything else outside of that?
Yeah. At the beginning of combat, we had some issues regarding cover. And I know there's the new action, fire through cover, which is nice. We used it a few times. Now, if you're a player who is using melee combat, cover can be kind of a barrier to get around. So I don't know whether we should consider some sort of move over cover and move around it, or charge through cover, some sort of action like that. But I think that's something to think about and to consider at least.
Well, yes and no. So that already exists. It's called move around cover. You hustle around cover. You charge around cover. You never charge through cover. You want to charge over a rock? Go ahead. I mean, we can fix that by simply saying hard terrain. Instead of saying you can't charge, maneuver, or run over hard terrain, we can instead say every time you move a yard in hard terrain, it costs 2 instead. So that's the easy way. So now if we do that at the super level, now it's like, you can charge right through terrain. You can run over terrain if you want, but it's going to cost you more. So same thing we ran into, like if you how much does it cost me to move through a low running creek? Well, in Zweihander, it's like it costs you 2 instead of 1. That's why we've kind of house ruled it. that wasn't put in Flame and in Project 7076. I don't know why. I'm thinking about it now. I'm like, why didn't we do that? So I think that can be solved very easily. But conversely, I'm taking a quick note, moving through it for 2 move instead of 1. I think, sorry, making a quick note. I think conversely, cover is important, right? Cover is important to protect you from being fired upon. If somebody is smart, if they're a smart player, they're going to kite people. And this is like, and I think everyone who's ever played an MMO understands what this concept is. If somebody's got a weapon and you've got ranged weapon or ranged magic, fire at them, move, fire at them, move, and get further and further and further away until they cannot close the distance. That is an intended design choice in this game, in this combat system, is to kite melee characters until they must pull out a weapon, take cover, or retreat. And that is the way that ranged combat works. The way it worked in colonial America. If they ran out of bullets, they would charge forward with bayonets. If you got in a knife fight, you were probably going to die. I don't want to talk too much about realism and verisimilitude because I think the ball and arm don't need to unwind in this, but I think that there's something to say around the way that combat works, right? So I've shared this with you all before, so I'm going to show you here on screen, and I hope my listeners can understand too. So I've got a purple dice in my left hand and a green dice in my right hand. In Zweihander, with melee-based combat systems, people go from one side of the battlefield and they meet like magnets, and they kind of like fight until somebody dies. That's what happens in melee combat-based games, including Zweihander. For Project 1776, which are weapons-based combat doesn't necessarily get closer typically unless there's a compelling reason to do so. Instead, your survivability goes up if you stay further and further away, and in fact using cover to your advantage until you're kind of flushed out of it, right? Like the idea of a turkey shoot, right? You get flushed out of cover. In this case, if you get shot and suffer damage while you're in cover, you have to get out of it. You can't take advantage of it anymore. So there's a strategy here to keep yourselves more and more distance as possible, at least until you find a tactical opportunity, like somebody, like in case of Mike, somebody is defenseless. You're like, well, shit, I can like charge forward and like knock them out. So those are the type of opportunities we want to promote in this combat system. We want, as opposed to people coming together like magnets, we want people to come together like rubber bands. Like they're going to snap like super quick together. And then hopefully if that person survives, they will try to get the hell away and keep firing and moving and trying to kite the person until that character who is in melee combat pulls out a ranged weapon and starts firing too. So those are intentional designs. It's the same thing, and it comes right back around to where we started with cover. The reasons why cover functions as it is. But I think to your point though, Nick, around getting around cover, there are ways around that now. But I think that adjusting how hard terrain works to make it a little bit more figure friendly, in particular, I'm thinking like on the grid with figures. I think that there's an opportunity to do that by simply changing the way that it works, as opposed to saying making a coordination test or saying you can't do it. We simply say, hey, it costs 2 yards instead of 1. Very simply handled, very elegant, very quick. It matches up with other things we've seen in our own home game, the way we've played it before. If anything, this combat system is a reflection of that. It's a reflection on the lessons that we've learned and applied in our own home games. We house rules Zweihander, ironically, I guess. I imagine that people who wrote and played D&D house rule it because they continue making new stuff. So, yeah, easily solved. Mike, from your perspective, is there anything that was kind of hinky in the game that you think we should maybe reevaluate?
Not that I felt enough to remember. So I think it was pretty good for our first run through. We got to see a bit of melee, a bit of range, a bit of magic. So I think we kind of did a decent job of covering the spread, and I'll just be interested to see in our games like how it's gonna end up being, how characters will react when we actually have like our characters on the line.
Yeah.
And when Adam's in, and because I can't remember, he's an animal tamer. So
Mhm.
that'll be interesting once we get
Yeah.
like an animal or beast in there,
Mm-hmm.
the mix.
So it's a good point. So let me go through all the actions in combat, and I'll tell you the action that there is, and tell you what we use. So there's charge, which we used, get up, which we used, hustle, which we used, maneuver that we used, run we used, and take cover we used several times. Cast magic we used, fire through cover we used, melee attack we used, ranged attack we used, target attack we used, but we didn't use mounted attack because nobody had horses.
No one had a horse.
Yeah. Rough and tumble abilities below the belt, definitely used it. Chokehold, definitely used it. Eye gouge, we definitely used that. Knockdown, we used that. And wrench limb was used as well. Special actions. First aid, we used that. Load, we used that. Quick load, we used that. Size up, we tried that, but failed. I'm on the fence about that ability, by the way, but we'll talk about it in just a few moments. Take aim, we definitely use that. Nobody waited. Not really much of use for waiting any longer now that we use rounds for combat. Words as weapons, we use that too. Tried. Reactions, assist, we didn't use that. Counterattack, we definitely use that. Defend, we use that. Enhance magic, we use that. And resist, we use that. So
we didn't have a chance to use assist because we were under foggy conditions or something like that.
Yeah.
So
essentially, out of the, I think there's like 40 actions in combat. We used all but 2.
All thanks to 7076.
Yes, right. Let's so obviously no. So there's a lot of I think what we'll do is maybe we'll do another kind of post-mortem like this, like next time after we run combat or something like that. We'll talk a little bit more about it. We'll probably do another playtest or two. When somebody can't make a game for Desperation Point, we'll record something fun like this just to do a little kind of outro side thing, if only to get all of us more comfortable and familiar with the rules. Granted, development started this in March. Combat's only been out for 2 months. So it's still fresh. It's in beta. And we've went through 9 revisions already. So that's a good thing. That's how much we got a lot of good feedback so far. And I think it's probably near its final form. Probably close.
Form.
Super Saiyan.
It's as good as it could possibly get, because at some point, this is the most important thing I learned working in agency, is that because you're billing clients for your time, there's a point where the creative director will say, okay, time for pencils down. In the same way, like when you run out of time at the SATs. So I think combat is probably close to pencils down time. We actually just put pencils down on professions recently. So I think combat will, after some of this latest round of feedback from you all, and then like we're waiting on another round from playtesters next week, that'll be the end of that, which feels really good because combat's important and we'll include it in our quick play. But thank you all so much for doing this. This was fun. I'm glad we're still able to actually get together and play despite the fact that Adam couldn't join us.
Yeah.
But for all of our listeners, thank you for tuning in. 1776. Spoiler alert. Guess what's coming to Kickstarter on October 5th? Project 1776.